Thank you for joining this brand new episode of Speaking of Happy with your host, Eli Rigatuso. Joining me today is Alex Lunasol, a single parent of two and teacher who loves writing and spending time outside. Thanks for joining us for this brand new episode of Speaking of Happy, starting right now. Yes, that is correct. Starting right this very moment. And I have to start the show with one other lovely thing that I have here. If I can find it, let me find it quick. Thank you to those of you who have tuned in. I will bring our special guest on in just a moment, but I have to start the show with something that, so I met my partner, a few months after I came out as transgender, and it was much to my surprise. So I certainly was not expecting to meet anyone. I wasn't looking to meet anyone. I had started my transition in April, May of 2015, and was on the fast track to do all the things that I thought I needed to do to be the man that I felt I was, right? And, did the therapy and got the letters and did all the stuff because that's what I thought my path should be. My path has had some twists and turns and shifts and drives and, ups and downs. And it's been an interesting one. But the reason why I bring up my partner is because my partner played a song for me once early on in my transition and right after we first met, because they appreciated something about me that I was still kind of struggling to be present with and be okay with and not dislike that part of myself. And it was the part of myself that I was often vilified for, and that is being able to share and express my vulnerability. And so
are the bravest man I've ever met.
So they shared this song with me.
You, unreluctant at treacherous ledge. Oh, you are the sexiest man I've ever been with. Oh, you never harder than with thumb and spin. Will you do what you do to provide? How you land in the soft as you fortify. This is in praise of the vulnerable man. Why won't you leave the rest of your cavalry home?
Okay, I can't fade out of that song. I wanted to play the whole thing, but I specifically wanted to bring this up because my guest on the show today posted something on their Facebook page that that really struck me, and and a couple of other folks as well who also posted. And that's what I actually wasn't going to do a show tonight because, to be honest, I'm not really feeling well. I was exposed to COVID last weekend, and I have a tightness in my chest, and I've been having breathing issues. I'm waiting for the lab results to come back. So I guess while I'm sitting here in my home, I've got my inhaler. I'm using it every 4 hours. Have been taking some over-the-counter cough medicine, which seems to be helping keep my cough down. So I'm happy about that. But I saw this post and I thought, I have to do an episode of Speaking of Happy on this topic. And so Alex posted, I love all the men in my life teaching me how to be a man. Not a toxic masculinity man, just some ways to greet people that aren't hugs and rules for urinals and such. And I just really appreciated that post. So I asked Alex if he would be willing to join me on the show and talk a little bit more about that post. But I also wanted to share a little bit more about Alex. Alex is a trans man who has chosen not to medically transition. And we're going to talk a little bit about that too, because I have some things to share. And has a great support system of friends and family. He also struggles with his mental health, but always tries to remain transparent about his highs and lows. Fun side note, he believed he could never do karaoke, but now he really enjoys it. So big round of applause, big round of virtual applause for Alex Lunasol. Alex, thank you so much for being a yes to coming on the show today.
Thank you so
Can
much
you
for
hear me
having
okay?
me. How are you?
There you are. I'm all right. I'm like I said, I'm dealing with the darn COVID bug.
Yeah.
So, but it is what it is, you know. I'm not, it's still kind of early on. I was feeling really horrible Monday and Tuesday. I couldn't really figure out why. And then my friend had contacted me, I believe it was late Wednesday, Thursday, to let me know that she had tested positive. I was just like, that is why I am feeling the way that I'm feeling.
I hope you feel better soon.
Yeah, I feel much better today than I was feeling the past few days. It's a struggle. I mean, one of the things that has been one of my biggest pet peeves, I guess that's kind of minimizing the impact, but the truth about the way that people have responded to this epidemic has just, I mean, it just angers me because I rarely leave my home anymore. And then when I do, here I thought I was safe, right? We're told, go ahead and go and be in small groups of people. And it's okay if everyone's been vaccinated to not wear your masks. And here I go. And what happens? I'm exposed to someone with COVID. Didn't know. And they had no idea until they started feeling lousy. And so, you know, it just is what it is. But it's, yeah, we'll just leave it there. I think you may have froze. Yep, you did. You're frozen. But it's okay. We'll wait until you come back again. If you have to leave and come back, that's totally cool as well. Don't worry about it because I'll still be here. Yes, they may have to leave and come back. He may have to leave and come back. But I will say this much. We do need to be aware of pronouns. And I love this because when I was speaking with Alex, I was pretty sure that his pronouns were he, him. But he reached out to me and just said, hey, you know, so for my clarification, can we trade pronouns? And I was like, absolutely. So we had that conversation and we did that. And that was great. And so I'm really happy about that. It's kind of a cool and easy way to talk to folks about pronouns and whatnot. So anyway, so I'm going to wait here until Alex comes back because he had to bounce. He had to bounce out. That's one of the things that happens sometimes with this virtual platform is unreliable internet access can be a pain in the hiney. But anyway, I wanted to have Alex come on the show today to talk about that post that he made and then share a little bit more about for us, for trans masculine and folks who are transgender, born assigned female, but identify as male, some of the things that we have to face in the world around who we are. And oh, there, Alex is back. Yay.
Hi, I'm so sorry about that.
Hey, it's totally fine.
Lincoln. I'm just off of my phone's internet connection.
It's totally fine. We had somebody on our Frankly Speaking, we had somebody join us from like Oceanside once.
Nice.
It was actually kind of cool. We were just like, can you transport us to your space where you are? But you know what? Can you turn your phone so that it's not up and down, but that it's too late because you already joined the stream sideways. So you're okay. We'll leave you that way. We'll leave you that way. It's all good. Okay. So what I was talking about is, first of all, the post that you made. Can you tell me a little bit more and give me a little bit more insight about the post that you made about the men in your life who are teaching you how to be a man, but not a toxic masculinity man? Share a little bit more with me.
Yeah, well, I have a lot of people in my life of all genders who have just been giving me little bits of advice here and there, and small things like going into the bathroom with me. And so I
Yeah.
learned from a couple men in my life that there are different rules for the men's restroom and the women's restroom. And growing up presenting femme most of my life, I had no idea that there were rules for the men's restroom. So
What kind of rules? Because I didn't know there were rules. I mean, I'll share with you that there's been some really weird things that men have done, but I don't know what the
oh,
rules are. Let's talk about those rules.
I don't know what the rules are either because I'm a newbie
Oh,
here. I'm a newbie. But in general,
yeah.
don't look at other people's junk. You
Well,
don't
that's
make
kind of that would.
conversation unless you like really know the person. Then keep it brief, even if you know the person.
Well, that sounds all kind of toxic-y to me, though.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, because you go in the women's restroom and it's like it doesn't matter who you are.
Social hour.
How, yeah, exactly. And you're like, hey, what's up?
Well, yeah. I mean, you're sharing a space. It's kind of like getting in the elevator, whether you're going one floor or 5 floors. I usually always say hello to the person. It's so
Yeah,
awkward when nobody says anything. It's like
it's
we're
yeah,
both looking at the numbers.
for sure.
Exactly. Well, are you willing to share with us a little bit around your choices in regard to your transition and what works for you? And just so for those folks who are watching who don't know, there are transgender folks who choose to medically transition, and there are transgender folks who choose not to medically transition. And each of those is valid for whatever reason, right? And actually, there doesn't even have to be a reason, right? It can just be this is just your choice and you're choosing this. But if you're willing to share with us where you're at in regard to that, we would certainly appreciate it. But again, if you say no, then we'll accept that too.
No, I'd be happy to share. I feel like when I first came out as a trans person, this is probably back in like 2006, I would say. I felt the need to do everything all at once, be on testosterone, get top surgery, get bottom surgery, all of that. But for me personally, right now, I just don't want to do any of that. I mean, for so many reasons, financial and just all the shit you have to go through, surgeries. I don't
Yeah,
want to do that. So that's just where I'm at right now. It could change.
sure. Yeah. Well, and that's the other thing that I think is so what becomes a struggle for some trans folks is the lack of folks being willing to validate who we say we are without the things that make us appear to be who we say we are.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. Like, if people could just look at me and call me sir and he and him and, gender me properly. But I feel like I have to jump through hoops and change myself drastically to get people to even recognize that I am who I am.
Yeah. And for myself, like I have done those things. I did go on tea. I actually made the choice to stop taking tea for my own health and well-being because I did not there were some ways that it was making me feel that I was like, this just doesn't feel right. And my body is always um kind of railed against synthetic drugs. Like I've
Yeah.
always had a problem with like painkillers, even like Advil and Tylenol and those kinds of things just have not uh they just haven't been my friend. Let's put it that way. And so I made the choice, it was after the first of the year this year, to stop taking tea. I did cut back on my dose because I was like, maybe if I cut back on the dose, I'll feel better. I'll feel differently. And that wasn't really the case. And since I've been off of it completely, I'm like, because the other thing that I thought about was here I was on tea and had been on tea for like 3 years, right? Almost 4. And a lot of changes were happening, but I was still being misgendered.
Yeah.
Like it didn't matter. Like I had much more hair than what I have on my face right now, and it just doesn't matter. And so I was just like, well, who am I doing this for? Right? Why would I
Yeah.
like again, I came out as trans because I realized for the first 50 years of my life, I was living to make everybody else more comfortable around me than
Right.
putting my comfort first.
And I think that's been the biggest lesson I've learned in what it is to be a man is that we need to put ourselves first. And I don't think that's even a message about being a man. I think that speaks for everyone, but that's what the men in my life have taught me. Like, put yourself first, take up space, don't apologize. And that's
Mm.
stuff, being growing up as a woman, stuff like that.
Well, I think that we do need to make some distinctions though about like not apologizing. There are times when you should actually apologize, but I think that what you're talking about and what they might be pointing to is that women are socialized, and I was socialized as female for 50 years. And being socialized female, there is that knee-jerk response of apologizing or saying I'm sorry when we didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think
Thank
that
you
there
for that
is some
distinction.
clarity. Yeah, there is some clarity I think that needs to happen around that, because I think that there are some trans men who would take that and kind of run with it, right?
Right.
And
You're right.
that's where we start to become toxic.
You're right. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's that line. So there's those things that we need to kind of like think about, I think, when we do that. But
Absolutely.
I do also appreciate what you shared about just about your mental health and struggling with mental health, because I think that if we're going to ever get to a point where we remove the stigma around mental health, it's really going to be, one person sharing a story at a time about what it is that they face on a daily basis and what works for them in their healing journey and all of those things. Would you care to share a little bit more with us about what you've learned on your journey to your mental health?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it is always that. It's a journey. I don't have one destination. I don't have one goal in mind when it comes to my mental health. But being diagnosed as bipolar and coming to terms with that and doing the research and putting the time in, it's taught me a lot about myself. And I think just being open and vulnerable enough to share that alone helps a lot of other people.
Absolutely. What would you say? Because I know that, we as transgender, non-binary, and gender non-conforming or gender diverse or expansive folks or two-spirit folks, we do have a high rate of suicide. And, what would you say to folks who are watching who might be in a very similar place as you in regard to the choices that they've made about their transition and their own mental health? What would you say to them to maybe help inspire them along their journey?
I would say you're making the right choice and it does get better. There are people who love you and accept you and cherish you. So be careful with your life. I've wanted to end it in regards to being trans and not in regards to being trans, but just know it gets better every day and you'll meet people who love you and accept you.
All right. Yes, I agree wholeheartedly. And I mean, I think that some of the things that we don't even really take into consideration or think about when we do become open about who we are in the environments that we're traversing through, it's like there's a bunch of bombs out in the field. And it's really difficult. One of the most difficult places that I came out at was my work.
Yeah.
My friends and family were incredibly, well, I say that family wise, there was some questionable support there, but it is what it is. I had gone through a bunch of different iterations in my life where family wasn't very supportive. So it already became kind of old hat to me. But I think it's important to understand for folks who are younger, who are transitioning, that have access to this kind of space and these kinds of stories, and you being willing to share your story is really important. But my coming out as trans was really difficult for me. I was really kind of euphoric right after I came out, like it was really glorious. And then when shit started to hit the fan at work, and I was daily having to deal with people misgendering me or dead naming me or referring to me, not even calling me Eli, but calling me Ellie. And, ended up on the fast track of almost being fired for being an angry trans man, which I wasn't really angry. I was just telling people, hey, this is not okay. How you're treating me is not okay. And then that was when my mental health started to take a turn, because it was just like, am I never really truly going to be happy? Am I ever truly going to be happy? And that was one of the most difficult parts, was to shift that perspective once again and say, what is it that I need to be truly happy? Regardless of anyone else around me. And there were people that I had to cut out of my life initially, and, create that barrier with some folks to have myself be safe and feel safe. So I can appreciate that. What are some of the things that you do in regard to your own mental health and well-being that help you to navigate difficult times?
I definitely like to journal and write poetry. I like to take pictures. They're just phone pictures. They don't mean anything to anybody but me, but it's fun. Those things help.
Hey, we would love to see some of your phone pictures. Just so everybody knows, when you come on Speaking of Happy, we do pay a stipend to our guests because we appreciate their time. Well, actually, not everybody that comes on Speaking of Happy gets a stipend, but anybody who is transgender, non-binary, gender non-conforming, gender diverse, two-spirit, I do always compensate folks for that, to come in and share their knowledge and experience and their love with the show, especially their stories. But if you would like to also tip Alex, you can do so at Venmo at Alex-Lunasol. So if you want to do that, please feel free to do that. And again, if there are any questions or comments that anyone would like to make, we're kind of sort of talking about, we haven't kind of gotten into it yet, about toxic masculinity and some of the ways in which we, as myself as a two-spirit trans masculine person, and Alex as a transgender person, transgender male, identifies as a man, what it's like for him to experience life the way that he's experiencing life. So Alex, what else do you have to share about it? What are some of the insights that you yourself had realized as you've been on this journey since 2005, you say?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it stems back to being a kid, honestly. I was talking about this with some friends today, but I grew up a girl in the 90s, and I just felt like men could be anything, could have anything. I wanted to be Michael Jordan, but I had people telling me in my life, find somebody and marry someone rich. Don't be the rich person. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do, which speaks volumes, because I was born in 1965, and that was what I railed against my whole life. It's like, look, I don't want to marry a wealthy man. I would like to be the wealthy man. Like, I really wanted to be Elvis Presley. I wanted to be Elvis. I kind of look like Elvis.
Jordan.
Yes, yes. He was my Michael Jordan. I do love to sing karaoke, always have, but I can't. Now that I've been on T, I mean, I can't hit the notes that I used to be able to hit,
dicey,
and
huh?
it is dicey.
I was on
Absolutely.
testosterone for a little bit, and it was like puberty all over again.
Yes, it is. As a matter of fact, at the tail end of the promo that I made for the show today, my voice did crack a little bit. I kind of had to laugh about that because it was like, wow, I haven't heard my voice crack like that in a while. What would you say to the young trans boys who might be watching, who are early on in their transitions and navigating some of these waters without being able to access medical transition because maybe they don't have supportive parents?
I'm your family now. Hi, my name is Alex. I'm your dad. Welcome. I would just say, just keep sticking with it. You know who you are. You don't have to have people question that. And the right people will be there for you and will accept you.
Awesome. So what had you say yes to being on the show today?
Mostly I just like you so much, Eli.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're a very good member of the community, and I really look up to you. So I was very, very happy to be a guest on your show today.
Aw, thank you. I appreciate that. There's just so much that still needs to be changed. There's just so many ways in which we still need to push for equitable spaces where folks like us can thrive.
Yeah, that's absolutely for sure. Yes.
I mean, when we think about it, like what was really heartbreaking to me when I first came out was realizing when I started to dig deeper into the stories of Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson and Miss Major Griffin Gracie and seeing how, they were still being treated with such disdain and disrespect, even in the late 80s, early 90s, way after Stonewall. And then looking at how I was being treated and immediately being able to see that or say to myself, I can totally understand why someone would uproot their entire life and move away and transition so that they could be seen as the person that they say they are. And there isn't that old history of people who had the excuse of, well, I've known you my whole life as blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, you know what? I've known you my whole life as blah, blah, blah too. But at least when you got married, I respected your name change.
I know. It's really
at least
that simple.
Yeah. Or if I've misgendered your dog and you've heatedly corrected me, I've said, okay, got it. And then gendered your dog correctly or your child. I mean, some people are so wonky about their kids being misgendered even. It's like, seriously? Like, I mean, there is one positive. I will say this. So back in 2015, even when I would post stuff about being trans and I would have people like come on my page and challenge me, like challenge and want to dispute my identity. And it was like other people would be following along and support me, but not challenge that person. Not say to the person who was challenging me, hey man, back off. Right. And so it was like, I was advocating and fighting for my own dignity and respect on my own Facebook page. But I do see now very frequently, because a lot of people don't realize this, I pay attention to what happens on Facebook for a reason. When I have folks who become my friend, especially young people, I watch their social media like a hawk. Don't even try to get on up on their page and cause any sort of grief, because Trampaw will come after you.
I love
is what I say. So just know yes, I have watched your page too, which is why I saw your comment today and was like, oh, hey, we should talk about that. One of the other things that I think is really interesting, for me in my transition journey is just getting to a point where I'm like, what really is masculinity and what really is femininity? Like, what are those things? Like, I mean, I get it from a point of there are girls who identify as girls and they want to be girly and they want to have their princess costumes and their wedding right out of the books of the best wedding magazines. And I get that. And I honor that and I affirm that, but I just don't know why it's so hard for folks to honor and affirm us.
Yeah.
you know, or even men, like, it's fine, go fishing and hunting. I could give a rat's hiney about whether or not you fish and hunt, though. Like, that's not my thing. I mean,
Yeah.
I was sad when my dad took me out hunting for the first time and asked me to shoot a dead rabbit off the fence. I was sad that he had killed the rabbit in the first place.
Yeah. I guess there are so many ways to be a man, and being a man has so many different definitions for sure.
So, what would you say is the most honoring way that people can be with you?
Just be with me.
Mm, yeah. Like, what would be the biggest thing? Like, what makes your heart swell and like gives you gender euphoria when people are
Um,
around you?
when people gender me appropriately, it's when I'm sitting around a bonfire and somebody says, "Oh, he blah blah blah," and I don't even think about myself because I'm not even used to hearing it about myself, and then I realize, "Oh, they were talking about me." That makes my heart swell when people just use he him pronouns for me.
Yeah. What would you say to folks who are like parents, for example, who might be struggling with their child who has come out as trans and struggling with pronouns? What would be your biggest recommendation for how a parent could support their kiddo?
I would say if you as a parent think you're struggling because your child is coming out as trans, just think about how much that child is struggling and put yourself in their shoes. I think the biggest thing we can do for suicide prevention is just respect pronouns. So if you're, I mean, we're all going to make mistakes, but if you're actively trying and you're practicing, you can practice in your head all the time what pronouns to use for your child. I would just do that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I love it when because a lot of parents will reach out to me too for just advice, and I'll consult with them, and I always get to a point where I have to correct them, and I'll say, "Hey, look, I'm correcting you in this environment because I just want you to get it right for your kid."
Right.
Like, if I would have had that when I first came out as trans at 50, like, the difference that it would have made for my health and well-being in that first year and a half, 2 years when I was so struggling with work and all the people that just didn't wanna see me for me, just to have people, like, honoring my pronouns in that at that point was really, like, it was super cool. So I get it.
Yeah, I think that's just the biggest thing. That's the most amazing feeling when somebody just honors the person that you say that you are.
Yeah. And I always say, "How do you get to know that person?" Well, you gotta just sit down and have a conversation with them. You can make a lot of
Yeah.
assumptions. Like, I could talk to your partner about you, Alex, but I'm pretty sure I would get a different version or a slightly altered version of who you are coming from
Yeah,
your partner, right?
for sure.
Or from your kids even. How are your kids about your transition? I always love hearing the stories about the kids.
They're perfect. They call me Dada, and I've talked to them about it. They're getting older now. They're 7 and 9.
Mm,
So I've said, if somebody makes fun of you or whatever because you're calling me Dada, what are you going to do? Is that you can call me something else? And they're like, "No, you're our Dada," and we'll just say that's our Dada. They're so good about it.
yeah. What would you say about the folks, I'm pretty sure you know about the fact that they're trying to update the education in public schools around folks, like sex education in public schools.
Hmm.
What would you say to advocate for those changes to be made? Because when I was reading through it, like I had tears in my eyes thinking about, wow, like if this had been happening when I was in grade school, how super cool would that have been? You
Yeah,
know?
I think that's just it. If you can just really picture people like myself and Eli as children, like tears in our eyes, like somebody's talking about being trans, or somebody's talking about, for me personally, like being queer, being gay in any way. Like I would have that education about myself and my body so I could have informed consent about my choices. And I feel like growing up, all I got was the heterosexual cis. That's it.
Yeah, I don't disagree. And that, for me, I feel like I shut down because of it. Like, I knew because I had vivid memories of when I was very young. I think it was around 5 or 6 years old that I told my mom that I believed that I was a boy born in a girl's body. Or at that time, I just said, I'm a boy. Like I believed I was
Yeah.
a boy completely and fully. And of course, that has evolved over time. But my mom was just like, no, that can't be possible. Sorry. Like, go put your shirt on. You are not going outside without your shirt on. And, that I internalized that in a multitude of ways. It was about, I had shame around my body, period. Right. Because it was, and my period, but, but like having so much shame around that. It was one of the other things that I realized as I was, going through the initial stages of my transition is that like, where am I really trying to go with this? Like, I don't need to get anywhere.
Yeah.
Like, really, the biggest like aha moment was, wow, I'm just trying to get right here. And just to like fully be me. Like, I will have to say this much. When I had my top surgery, like major euphoria to this day, when I look at my chest in the mirror, like, but there still is that shame that goes with like being around other people with my shirt off.
Yeah.
Totally comfortable around my partner. My partner's been wonderfully affirming in many of the different ways in which they have just experienced me and my body. But like, still there's times like people don't understand the times when I post that like, hey, I mowed my lawn without my shirt on today. Like, that's a pretty big damn deal.
Yeah.
To
for sure.
bust through
Congratulations.
some shame. Yeah, I haven't done it recently because I haven't felt well enough to mow my lawn, but
Aw.
but it's all good. Sorry. So Alex, what else? What else? I mean, we have 20 minutes left to share and to talk. Like, do you have any questions for me? Or is there something else? Like, is there something else that you would like to say about?
I have questions for you, Eli.
Okay.
I'm wondering what it was like, or what your perception is like coming out in your 50s, as opposed to maybe when that moment you told your mom I'm a boy, like how your perception of that whole situation.
Well, I'll tell you, one of the things that I think about today is, there's also the intersection of my being two-spirit, of my being indigenous. And had my mother not had that knowledge of her people and what I've learned about our Menominee Nation and about the Sioux and Lakotas, because we are a mix of Sioux and Menominee. We've always known that. I don't know exactly which Sioux Nation, because there's a number of different Sioux nations. There's the Ogallala Sioux, the Lakota Sioux. Like, I don't know for sure which nation we're from, but I do know that both honored two-spirit folks like me. And so there's like, again, there's this ancestral trauma that I've had to kind of work through about the fact that that was stripped from me, along with our language, along with just all of our culture and traditions. So, people ask me a lot if I regret waiting and coming out as trans at such a late point in my life. And I always say, well, no, I don't, because I have been offered some gifts in being allowed to be socialized as female, and the gift of being in rooms with all women who have shared such beautiful, intimate stories with me. And I've been able to really hone my own feminine side. And so, like, for me, that's why I landed on being transmasculine. And I say that, like, I think that had I been honored at that young age as being two spirit and being both and, that I might have been okay with any and all pronouns. Although I think that there would have been a missing in being able to have distinctions as they apply to different people and understand, like, this is why one of the things that I teach a lot in some of the trainings that I facilitate is that, like, look, I'm not going to make any assumption about you. And what I hope in the teaching is that you understand not to make assumptions about other people. And then when you do and you're called out on it, you don't become a complete asshat and that you take the feedback and you go, thank you very much for that. I'll make note of that. And I apologize for saying that to you, Eli. So, I mean, it's kind of a both,
Right.
like, like I'm totally fine with he pronouns and they pronouns, but I bristle at she pronouns. But is that because I was forced to accept it for the first 50 years of my life? Right?
Right. Yeah, that's all so valid. Everything you shared. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, you bet. What else you got for me?
Well, I want to know, is there anyone in your life that you looked up to aside from like your Michael Jordan? Is there anyone else in your life you looked up to as a man that made you think like, oh, this, like, I want to be a man. Like, this is why.
Um, I don't know if I ever really looked at it from the perspective of I want to be a man and this is why, because I feel like this was always a part of me.
Mm-hmm.
It was like finding that man in me and then allowing him the space that he needed to express himself in
Yeah.
whatever way he chose to do that, right? Like the irony behind, like, I hated my long hair my entire life. And then when I came out as trans and I was cutting my hair in more masculine styles, and like I was so happy because now my stylists weren't fighting with me and they're like, well, of course I'll give you a high and tight, right? Of course I'll shave your head for you, Eli. Like, no big deal. But then when I started reading more about my Menominee Nation and how Native men, like how important their hair was and is to them. And I found out like 2 years prior to my mother's passing away last year about that, and that a Native man wouldn't cut his hair unless he suffered a severe loss in his life. So I started growing mine out because I knew that my mom wasn't going to be here much longer. I didn't know when mom was going to go, but I wanted to grow my hair out. And as a matter of fact, the 1-year anniversary of her passing is Monday, and I had planned a trip to Phoenix, which I had to cancel. And we were going to fly out, my friend Steven, who's an elder here in Omaha, and we paid for an airline ticket for him to fly out to cut my hair and do a ceremony, and to cut my sister's hair and my nephew's hair so that we could do an offering on the 1-year anniversary. And so now I'm torn, right? Because now I want to hang on to my hair because of that significance as an Indigenous man.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's so interesting to me that, like, there are so many ways in which I saw how I had been colonized
Mm-hmm.
and the things that I bought into,
Mm-hmm.
that actually being transgender and owning that part of me, I have become more intrinsic, more internal and have done more self-searching and seeking, but truly being with all of the things that I am and honoring that for me. Because you know what? If you can't, that's fine. But if I honor it for me, then I can stand confidently in any conversation, in any room with any human being.
Absolutely.
And so there's a lot of different things that go into that, right?
Yeah, I'm so sorry for your loss. And I know that whatever choice you make with your hair will be the choice that's for you and your family.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm just so bummed that I had to cancel my trip and
Yeah.
that I have to wait for these darn lab results to come back because my brother-in-law is immune compromised. So if I do, obviously, if I have COVID, I don't want to bring it to him. But then also, like, I still feel like because I was exposed that I should wait for a couple weeks before I go out around people again. I mean, I just don't know, you know. But last year, getting COVID was brutal. And so, you know, I don't know if this is going to get worse or if it's just going to stay where it is.
Yeah, I don't know either. And it's all really scary.
Yep. And it's just kind of ironic that it's happening right around the same time of year that my mother got sick and died of COVID. Like that's what took her from us.
Yeah.
You know, like here's a regret. You want to talk about a regret I have is that I didn't have more conversations with my mom about her growing up.
Yeah.
And learn more from her. Like a lot of the questions that I finally started to ask, you know, like 2 or 3 years before I started transitioning, we interviewed some of the elders in our family because we knew that we were going to be losing them. These were my mom's brothers and sisters who were older. And in doing those interviews, just hearing some of the stories that they had to share, you know, it was just heartbreaking to me. So I tried to interview my mom, but she just was, you know, her mental faculties were too far gone for us to really get a lot of the stories that she even knew and had told me. And I had shared with her like some of those things, trying to like spark her memory. And it just didn't happen. So I do regret that, not being more curious about that sooner.
That's valid,
Yeah.
but I mean, we can only do what we can in the moment, and you didn't know.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, but you didn't know.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, I will say this much, though. I knew enough to take care of some things way prior to my mom getting sick in regard to just my relationship with her. And I know that was a guiding, like there was a native spirit guiding me, so that I could be there for my mom during her hard time with her health, with her dementia and all of that. So yeah, no regrets there.
Good.
What else you got for me, Alex?
Do you have pets?
You know, I don't have any pets right now. I had a number of pets with my former partner, and she kept them all. I ended that relationship shortly after I came out as trans, not because of my being trans, but more so I realized that I was no longer in love with her. And I felt like it wasn't fair to stay in a relationship with her because she could, you know, what if I was keeping her from the person she was meant to be with?
Yeah.
And so when I broke up with her, she was like, yeah, you know, about these animals, you're not getting any of them.
Aw, bummer.
We tried about a year and a half afterwards, but you know what? She loves her animals so much that she admitted at one point to me that she just really wasn't, like, it would be difficult for her to give any of them up.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well,
How about
hey,
you?
at least they're in a loving home.
Absolutely. They indeed are in a loving home. She's an amazing pet parent, and they've lived, you know, we actually lost Kaipo last year.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, he died shortly after my mom. He was a big old white Labrador with a heart of gold. So he ended up getting lymphoma. So,
Oh, poor baby.
what about you? Do you have any pets, Alex?
Okay, so I have a cat, but I am getting a house soon, and I promised the kids that as soon as I got a house, we would get a dog. So
Exciting. What kind of dog are they wanting?
my daughter really wants a golden retriever. I don't know anything about dogs, so golden retriever sounds good to me.
Okay. You know what? Retrievers are very good dogs. They are
Yeah.
very high energy, and for the first 3 years, they will be a puppy. Just FYI.
Okay.
As soon as you hit that 3-year mark, though, all of a sudden they become like more adult-like.
Oh, weird.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's exactly what our Kaipo, the Labrador, he was pretty much the wild puppy for the first 3 years. And then when we hit that 3-year mark, he was like, oh, hey, all that stuff you've been teaching me and telling me, I'm going to do it now. We're good.
Nice.
I'm going to stop tearing apart. I'm going to stop tearing apart furniture and couch cushions now. Because I've realized I like to lay on these things.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's true.
All right. Oops. I was posting here. So the other thing that's kind of cool is on this StreamYard thing is that people who are watching, if there are people watching on YouTube or Facebook, they can actually ask questions there, and then the questions will populate here. And then I can click on them. So I can actually interact with the audience, which is super cool. So, like, for example, I just posted that question to both YouTube and on Facebook. Right? So if people have questions, they can feel free to ask. But I don't know. It doesn't look like we have many viewers out there, which is totally fine. I just love to do this. I get bored here at my house. And so I'm like, I love to talk. So why not just have conversations with folks who also love to talk? And then, especially folks who are transgender and non-binary, we start to talk about things differently than folks who are cisgender. And it's like, God, I wish I would have recorded that conversation because it would be so cool to just share that with people and have them be able to experience what it's like to be us and gain some insight without having to worry about being shamed for asking questions.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. I do tell people, though, when they ask those questions, the more offensive questions, I say, I will answer this question, but I do want you to know that every trans person you meet, it's not really cool for you to ask them that question because, like, why do you need to know that?
I had someone like literally shake my hand. Hi, I'm Alex. Hi, I'm so-and-so, and say, so when are you getting the surgery? And it just caught me so off guard. I didn't even know what to say.
This was like an in real life. You're just meeting this person, shaking their hand, and they ask you this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. And I would have been like, and so when are you having your tongue removed? Because apparently you don't know how to use it, or at least your vocal cords. Maybe that would help. Yeah. I also say, I think colonization and forced assimilation is also at fault for some of the ways in which we get treated as transgender and non-binary and gender diverse people, right? Because people just have this belief, especially folks who are of very white complexion, but I will say this, there are folks who are not decolonized folks who are also Native and Black and Brown folks who will ask questions that I'll be like, oh, hey, I got a couple books you should read.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's see here. We got 5 minutes left. And I am going to say, I'm trying to think of what is a good question to ask you, Alex. Oh, I know. How did you get into writing? And what do you have any poems of yours maybe memorized by heart that you could share with us? If you want to, you don't have to.
I would say I got into writing at a very young age. I started journaling very young. Poetry just followed suit. I do have one poem memorized, but it's not appropriate, so we're not even gonna go there.
What? How do you mean it's not appropriate? Is it a sexual poem?
It has a lot of yes, yeah, in a sexual way.
Because
Yeah.
okay, because I was gonna say this is the interwebs, and it is a Friday evening, and I always tell people that past 6 o'clock on a Friday evening, if you're letting them watch something like this, and again, maybe they'd learn something, right?
Right.
But you don't have to share it. It's all good.
I'm good.
All right. So, are you a teacher as in you teach in public school? Or are you a teacher as in you teach your children at home? Because I know that there's a couple of different kinds of teachers in the world now.
I'm a substitute teacher at a Montessori school, so I go between about 10 different locations.
Oh, awesome. How'd you get into that?
Well, it's ages 6 weeks up to 6 years, and I've had experience in that for quite a while.
Very cool. My mom taught at a Montessori in Kansas many years ago.
Nice.
Yeah. She always
What do you
loved
do
kids,
for work?
my mom. Well, I'm the senior video producer director at Bellevue University in Bellevue, Nebraska.
Nice.
And
Very
yeah,
cool.
so that's kind of fits right in with what I'm doing here. I mean, I love to do video types of things. And so I find myself even doing it on my days off.
Nice.
Just because it's fun. I think it's fun. Right? Were you able to go to Pride at all this year? Did you go to Lincoln's Pride or Omaha's Pride?
I did go to Lincoln's Pride, and it brought me to tears. Just, I think a lot had to do with, the pandemic and missing out on being with a community in public for so long. Just being surrounded by, people like me was incredible. I saw that you went to the Pride Parade too, but I didn't see you in person.
Yes, I was at Lincoln's Pride Parade and I was at the festival. They asked me to speak.
Nice.
So I gave a little talk to our trans masculine friends.
Oh, awesome. I'm sure you rocked it.
Well, thank you. Yeah. I was so I didn't know this and don't want to open a can of worms here, but so not this year and not last year, obviously, because there wasn't a Pride in Lincoln the last year. But the year before that, they had a not so good experience because someone had approached a trans man who had had top surgery, who had his shirt off, and made him put his shirt on.
Oh.
And so the community kind of got a little upset when that got out. And so there was some fallout from that. And then, so this year I was talking about normalizing trans men who are overweight and normalizing trans men who have had top surgeries. And I took my shirt off on stage only to find out later that they said nobody could take their shirts off, although they were still letting people with pasties walk around and they weren't telling them to put their shirts on. But a couple of trans guys in the audience had taken their shirts off and then they were walking around and one of them later was told to put his shirt on. But I was just like, was that your response to the year that you got called out for telling a trans man to put his shirt on, to tell everybody to have their shirts on? Right. I'm a proponent of freeing the nipple because I think that everyone should be able to walk around without their shirts on. And that's what they choose because
Hell
we've
yeah.
sexualized breasts. We've sexualized female breasts. Men with breasts
Right, there you
can
go.
walk around openly, right? And that to me
Mhm.
is a problem because I've seen some men with breasts that I'm like, whoa, can you put those away? So the double standards are, I think double standards are toxic, right?
Eli, my phone is on 1%, so I just want to say before I go, thank you so much for having me.
You are so welcome. It is 7:00, so it is time to say goodbye. Thank you so much to our viewers and those of you who joined us today on another episode of Speaking of Happy, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Thanks, Alex. Have a great one.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Bye.